Charles, welcome again, my friend.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on, Charles. Busy day, Charles, at MLS. Let's get right to it. A couple trades, one Toronto and Montreal, but the big one of the day, the Red Bulls and the Montreal Impact. A couple key players going to Montreal's way, and Felipe Martins going back with his old coach, Jesse March. Break that down for us. Who did you like that won that trade in that deal?
There's a little bit of unfinished business here because the scuttlebutt is that the Red Bulls have made this move in order to move to the top of the MLS allocation order to acquire Sacha Kljestan, who is a U.S. international looking to come back from abroad after a few good years in the Belgian league. So that's going to look a little different if they get all those ducks in a row and acquire Kljestan. Then this is going to look a little bit better from the Red Bulls' perspective. But until then, I've got to shave this one to Montreal. They picked up a couple proven assets, the international roster spot, and the allocation money. Now, we don't know how much they've got, and what kind of financial power that's going to bring them. But I think they've done very well here, bringing more depth to the midfield and bringing in a really talented young player, Ambroise Yongo, who can play left back or left wing. Young, raw player still, but very exciting, huge upside on that kid, and I think he'll be fun for the Impact fans to watch.
Charles, I was just speaking to our colleague in New York off the top of the show, breaking down this trade as well. And I asked him, and I'll ask you the same question. If I'm Dax McCarty, if I'm Bradley Wright Phillips, how far do I go into the season before I make that call to my agent and say, hey, enough is enough? Because Henry's not there. We're seeing that a lot of guys that are on this squad now are less than the age of 25. Jesse March is coming in. The fans having a revolt at that town hall meeting that their fan favorite Mike Petke was let go. To me, if I'm Dax McCarty, I would have asked to be shipped off to Orlando.
Well, I think Dax can look forward to an upgrade in his midfield partner. Eric Alexander is a very good player. I think he's going to continue to contribute steadily. I think he played in every single one of the Red Bulls regular season games the last two seasons. But he doesn't quite have the same vavoom, we'll say, that Kljestan does. Alexander can link play very well. He and Dax could really patrol that engine room. But Kljestan is going to be able to do that, plus pick out those killer passes, can float around into dangerous attacking positions. So if they get him in Red Bull colors, it's a little bit of a statement of intent. Obviously, you're not going to go out and replace Thierry Henry with a signing like that. Maybe you can't replace Henry with anybody, per se, but and I think what you're seeing with New York here is that this is a club where we're seeing the result of high expectations and a new management group that wants to put their own stamp on things. So in a sense, this is not that different from what you would see in any big club around the world where a new brain trust wants to do things their way, and they have their own ideas of how they're going to improve the team that they've inherited. So certainly to some extent, there's inevitably players that get hurt in that process because they're just not rated by the new guys the way they were by the previous regime. Certainly there's a lot of restlessness among the Red Bull supporters, but what this comes down to, and with all New York sports teams, if you get the business done, if they win games this coming season, then that's going to quiet down really quickly. Absolutely.
Charles, let's continue to talk about Montreal Impact, who I like to call Team Canada, with a Canadian coaching staff and some Canadian players, a Canadian owner. Didn't stop today. They picked up Dominic Oduro. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's almost 30 years of age, a guy that I haven't been really impressed upon throughout his MLS career. A lot of great speed he brings to the table. He's got great hustle, but really a guy that has bounced around all over. Why would Montreal want to go after a guy like this that has struggled with a couple of clubs previously?
I heard one colleague of mine a few years ago refer to Oduro as a Lamborghini without a steering wheel, which is a little harsh. He's added a lot to his game since that remark was made, but it fairly describes him. This guy's got speed to burn. He might be the fastest player in the league. He might be the fastest player in North America, period. The guy can open it up. I think when you look at what the Impact did last year in bringing in those attacking pieces in that kind of the front four they've got there, they had a bunch of schemers and they had some smart guys who can kick out a pass, who can finish, but I don't know that they necessarily have that speed merchant who can maybe stretch the defense, who can open up spaces and get on the end of runs. When you look back at what Oduro did with TFC last year, Michael Bradley created a ton of chances for him, And there was some really promising stuff that went on in that attacking third for TFC. It was just that the finishing wasn't quite there. You're always going to get frustrating moments with Oduro like that. There's going to be chances he gets on the end of that he's not going to finish. That said, he's getting on those chances that other players simply don't. So there's something there. There's a raw ability there to get behind people, and maybe that's going to bring out the best in his teammates up there in Montreal.
Charles, let's talk about TFC a bit. We're sitting here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And to me, in this offseason, like last offseason, but this one more, I believe it's playoffs or bust for Tim Bazbachenko and Greg Vanney. If they don't get into the playoffs in 2015, I think there's going to be a lot of heads rolling. But I believe what they've done this offseason is great for the city of Toronto, especially with the Italian community, bringing in Giovinco, but other smart moves like a guy in Altidore. But to me, a move that hasn't been made yet, that was talked about yesterday, I said it a few months way back, and I'll keep saying, others have said it, I believe Michael Bradley is the real deal. He's a fierce competitor. He is the leader on the field, but also off the field. Would you, Charles, now take the leadership role, the captaincy armband, away from Stephen Caldwell and give it to Michael Bradley? I would. How about you?
The way you frame that, I don't know that I'd frame it quite that way. I suppose in one sense, inevitably, you're taking it away from Caldwell, but I think even Caldwell himself, if you have an intelligent conversation behind closed doors, probably Greg Vanney, maybe it's Bezbachenko as well. I think if you had that discussion with him, let's say, listen, let's look at where you're at in your career versus where Michael Bradley is, what you bring to the table, what we've invested in you respectively. I don't think that Caldwell, knowing him and his maturity and his age, is going to necessarily have a problem with that, because Bradley is the engine of this team. And, Michael Bradley's been dealing with doubters and high pressure since he was a wee lad because of who his father is, because of how young he went pro back with the old Metro Stars. I think he's been through the fire and then some, both at home and abroad, and he's prepared to do whatever is necessary to get that club where it needs to go, where it hasn't been. I think it's ironic to hear you say what you said at the beginning, because we were saying a lot of these same things about the Ryan Nelson regime a year ago, right? So I think we're at a point now with TFC where every year it's got to be the year, right? That drought, that postseason drought just keeps stretching out. Everybody in that club is under pressure. Everybody wants to get it done yesterday. And, of course, the fans are just absolutely going stir crazy, to some extent, understandably.
Let me ask you.
So, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, Charles. Go ahead.
Well, I think at some point now that you've got to let some club culture take over, create some continuity. You've gone out and gotten good players and good people. Now let's build something here. We see so many off-season changes. We see so many overhauls, so many personnel changes in the front. But I'd like to see Toronto see whatever happens this year. Let's give these guys a chance. Let's try and create some stability, because that's what has been lacking up there.
Let me ask you this, Charles. Something that has really been on my mind the last few days with the Giovinco, Altidore signing, Maloney signing in Chicago as well. We're starting to hear all over North America. I got to tell you, I've been sent messages in the last few weeks from players from Italy, from Central and South America, asking me to help them connect with some of the GMs in MLS to help them come, even play on their USL Pro squad. That's how desperately they want to come here. We're hearing now today Real Madrid, Spain, Hall of Famer, World Cup winner Casillas possibly would like to come here to MLS. We hear Antonio Cassano didn't have many nice words to say about MLS, but that's Cassano for you. He's playing with a few screws loose anyway. But my question is this, Charles. Is now the time that MLS really has to rethink things over and allowing more and more quality European and South American players to come here like they did in the old NASL days and say, hey, it's time we make noise, it's time we make a splash, and it's time we put MLS on the world map of soccer?
The short answer is yes. Of course, the way in which MLS is structured means that the people writing the checks are inevitably going to want it to be done in a measured fashion, in a way that's sustainable. And of course, these topics are all in everyone's mind right now. The collective bargaining agreement negotiations taking place and looking like they're not going particularly smoothly, in large part, because there's owners that want to open up the checkbook, and there's owners that like this measured financial model. I think when you look at just what a league, a Canadian and American league has going for it, there's a lot of things that players want. Players want stability. Players want their checks to come on time. They want to have the lifestyle that they can enjoy here, whether they're making money here or just bringing money here and making a little bit more. So I think there's a lot that the league has going for it just based on its locale and the cities that guys can live in. The question now is, to what extent does that handbrake come off, right? How many checks do we write? How big are the checks? How many designated players can teams go out and get? And I think what we're going to see, or at least see signs of, is there's going to be a growing internal debate among the owners. There's those risk-averse owners, and there's those guys like MLSE and Saputo that want to write the checks, that want to get this thing going at a higher tempo. So I think there's going to be a lot of external debate, and there's probably going to be a lot of behind closed doors cussing and discussing of that, both this month and next month and in the years to come.
Charles, we'll close it out with this. We really appreciate your time. You talked a little bit about the CBA there. Let me ask you what you think is the number one sticking point for this season not to be kicked off on time. I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. I believe it could be free agency, but I'd like to hear what you think could be the number one sticking point of the CBA getting done.
Yeah, I don't see how there's anything else. Everybody knows that the salaries are going to go up. The salary cap's going to go up a bit. We can argue about whether they'll add another designated player spot. But those are all things that are, those are kind of devil in the details things. The fundamental issue of free agency, which, the players and the league can't even agree on what free agency is, right? The league has a very specific business structure that essentially doesn't allow for free agency that has a simplistic term. So there's going to have to be some smart people on both sides of the table working really hard to come up with a new idea of what free agency is. The players, they sound really determined to hold out for that. The question is, what do they believe free agency is going to look like? Because in a single entity system, it's never going to be quite what you see in the big European leagues on the world transfer market. So they have to really strike a compromise, and I think it's going to take some time, and I am afraid that there's not enough time in a short month or so that we have left to opening day for them to get it done. But, the last deal got done about 5 days before opening day, and maybe they'll cut it close again and still get it in under the wire.
Charles, it's been a pleasure having you on once again. I feel like every time you're on, it's a chess match, and it's fun to play with you, that chess game. You know your stuff inside out when it comes to MLS. Great having you on. As we let you go, where can people follow you on Twitter so they can follow you and read all the great stuff you talk about?
Yes, I'm at @CBoehm. That's CBOEHM on Twitter, and you can check me out on a bunch of sites, including SoccerWire.com, MLSsoccer.com, USSoccerPlayers.com, and SoccerGods. So check me out, or just send me a tweet, and we'll get the chat going from there.
Outstanding. Charles, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedule and your life. We really appreciate it. And again, it was a pleasure having you on. Have a great night, Charles.
Likewise. Y'all do the same.
Charles Boehm, an outstanding guy. Really appreciate him coming on, talking to us about all things MLS. He really